This video is going to basically be about application architecture, web application architecture. And the idea here is to kind of talk about, as a new developer, what do you get into when you're thinking about like how to build a whole entire web application from the back end to the front end, including what do you consider back end, what do you consider front end, John.
So this will address the stack.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about the whole stack here. So I guess I don't know. Do you want to give some background of what you've been doing lately, John?
Yeah, for sure. Just been motivated to start really digging into programming language, and JavaScript seemed like I guess not only because it's really expressionable, like it's
expressive. Yeah, that's
the because it's really expressive. It's a little easier to, I feel, get into, and then also it's like the Google of internet frameworks right now. So
yeah, JavaScript is taking over everything, and it's been that way for a few years now, it seems like.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I love when I see an article on the internet that's like, why JavaScript sucks and you should use it in everything.
Yeah. So to be clear, I guess, like, how long have you been coding and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I have varied kind of dabbling over the years with different things like ActionScript for Flash games, and I know a fair amount of like markup language like HTML and stuff like that. But JavaScript really, I think it was actually a conversation I was having with you maybe a month or so ago, where I was just expressing kind of wanting to know what the next step for my career, path and stuff, could be. And we started speaking about React, and I think you encouraged me to look into React. And then I think on my own I sort of realized that I would do better if I went back and started really looking at the fundamentals of JavaScript, because I don't want to be a React programmer. I want to really kind of understand like what React is built on top of as well. And so mostly I've just been going through tutorials, a lot of good both written and video tutorials on the internet, listening to kind of higher end, concept principle stuff like this, like while I'm at work, and then I don't know, taking some time to try and write some stuff out.
Building things.
Yeah,
cool.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, and so I've been developing apps at big companies, small companies, startups for maybe 6 years now since I've been out of college. And
All right.
so I've worked on really large applications and really small applications. And I've done a lot of server-side stuff, I've done a lot of database stuff, and I've done a lot of client-side, like heavy JavaScript stuff. So I kind of have a general background in all kinds of different technologies and ways of persisting data and structuring applications.
And you full-time as a Java programmer?
Yeah, so lately the team I'm on, it's kind of different because we maintain part of a mobile app for a very large company, and this part of the mobile app, it has a lot of back-end services. They're Java services. They're actually written in Groovy, and it's got a front-end component where they're actually these mobile apps are written in Java on Android, and then Swift in iOS. And they're consuming the Java services from the client side. And then we're also rewriting everything in React Native right now. And we have a couple of dashboards and management systems that are written in React and using Redux. So we've got everything from server-side applications to mobile applications to web applications on the project I'm working on.
So then I think a perfect question that I could think of off the top of my head is like, what has motivated your company to adopt React?
Yeah, so I guess React is really nice because it's if you ask most people, the really big client-side JavaScript framework that was around for a while was Angular, and Angular a lot of people really started to push back against because it was really hard to manage state, and you'd end up with massive Angular applications that they just get really brittle. They're hard to test. They ended up being like megabytes of code on the front end, so they're slow.
Spaghetti.
Yeah, in React, React's got really popular, especially with Redux, which is the state management that most people are using with React now. And it lets you manage the state of your application. And by that, I mean the data in it and what is going on the UI side. Like if you're manipulating and changing data, like you're going and fetching stuff from the server and the client's entering, or the user is entering stuff into the browser, you're managing that state internally inside the UI, right? And then what happens is now you've got this state in the UI, but maybe you're sending some of this data back to a server.
Okay.
But it gets really complicated to manage what's going on inside of your UI. Like if somebody refreshes the page, like how do you recreate what they had at that moment unless you're really managing it well? Okay. And then also things like deep linking, like if you're going to deep link into something in an application, well, on a modern JavaScript application like Angular or React, that's like a fake link. There's not really a corresponding like HTML page that goes to that. You're loading up some controller or some component, and the component's getting populated with, you know, whatever corresponding data that the user should have in their cookie that says like this user's logged in and they need to load this data for this ID or whatever. So you have to really be able to easily destroy and rebuild state. And then the other thing is the thing that would happen in Angular applications, because people weren't managing state at all. They'd have just big controllers, and the controller was kind of the thing that would load up the components on the page. And what would happen would be they would get into weird, funky states because they'd have a bunch of controllers loaded at the same time, and the user had been clicking around in the app for, you know, maybe a minute or two, more than that. If it was like some kind of business-to-business application, maybe they're in there for hours. And then you can get a bunch of controllers in a funky state that you can never reproduce and test and understand what went wrong where.
Yeah, and you're not sure how they're like crossing over.
Yeah.
Like how they're crossing wires with each other because you have a bunch of them.
Right,
open.
right. And what Redux came and did was to kind of unify state management into one central store of state for the whole application. And then what you do is when you change state, you have these things called reducers, and when an action triggers a stage to change state, the reducer gets a notification and then goes, and that's the only thing that can change the state. It's like one-way data binding the whole way down. We don't have to get too far into that, but that's the big difference about like why people are using React, because it just makes way cleaner front-end architecture than a lot of Angular apps have been in the past. And then so the new Angular framework, I haven't used it much, but I have heard that by default it's one-way data binding, and you can use Redux with Angular. But that was the problem with the old Angular. Everything was two-way data binding, and things got really complicated really fast. The other thing with these big JavaScript frameworks is they're really new. So Angular was probably one of the first big ones. Ember is another big one also that was one of the first ones. Before that, there was something called Backbone, which was, it's hard to even call it a framework because you had to do everything yourself almost. And then there were things like Knockout that really just did like rendering.
Was it just like a boilerplate?
I mean, they helped you render like elements, the DOM and things, but at that point, I mean, before Angular got really popular, a lot of people were just using jQuery, and then everything was just like random functions that called jQuery stuff, and hopefully you called them in the right order and you could keep track of what's going on.
So that's what I was gonna say. So like before like these programs that did state, these packages that do state management became popular, like what were people doing?
They'd build these really massive jQuery applications, and then so the other thing that you've got to,
and so that's why jQuery is not quite as necessary anymore, is because a lot of this is just
exactly. Like if you're using React or Angular or something, they're doing all of the DOM manipulation for you. That's all abstracted away, so you don't have, like, jQuery is great for cross-platform DOM manipulation, but if you don't have to manipulate the DOM ever, then why do you need jQuery?
Sure.
So
interesting.
The thing is, what's happening in these really heavy JavaScript applications is you're not really, it's not really the same as the way applications used to be. I was going to show this this image here because this is kind of like a good example of like what the classical multi-tier architecture is. Like you've got a server, which is your data tier, and then you've got a logic tier, which is your server-side app. It's what is calling the database and then serving the data back up to the client. And your presentation might even be served by the logic tier, basically. Like you could think of it this as like a web application, and it's like maybe serving HTML. So if you hit an endpoint, like if you hit this endpoint here, maybe that's actually hitting a server, and the server is returning a fully rendered HTML page, and your browser's displaying it. What happens now is normally no matter what you hit on the browser, if you hit a client-side application, it's just going to return you a bundle of JavaScript, and then it's going to figure out what routes to hit on the backend. And maybe it's a totally different backend server, like it would be like api.wikipedia.org. And you can even see this is probably something like that, because that hash mark there, that means this is the actual URL, right? And the hash mark, that might be all client-side routing. Because that could all just be client-side routing inside of an Angular app or something. And then the part before it, that could be server-side routing. This is actually hitting that server application, and then this tells the client to go like get this media file. But that could be an AJAX request on the front end. So yeah, now the way apps normally work is you have really heavy front-end clients, and they'll download this bundle of JavaScript, and then they'll just start doing a bunch of AJAX requests. So they'll start hitting an API server a bunch.
Which is asynchronous
JavaScript, yeah. And we might be able to inspect this just to give us an idea here. I'll look at the network, and you can filter on XHR. So yeah, you can see this even did that. This actually is that kind of application, you can tell.
Okay. So it's got its own routing after the
do you see what it's doing? It's like, oh, here, I'm going to load this thumbnail, and then it came back with this response. This is a PNG. So that's going to look weird if you look at it, but
I'm going to learn to write that.
Right. Just completely compressed PNG code. So yeah, applications work a little bit differently than they used to, where the common thing was you'd have a template engine on the back end, and then like you'd have the idea was model view controller is what it was called, and your model would be the data tier, and the controller would be the logic tier, and the view would be the presentation tier, that you could think of.
Yeah, I've heard that a couple places, but so why is that not the current standard thing?
Now we're shifting all of the client-side code to the client, right? All the presentation code, it's going down to the client's machine. You're no longer rendering stuff on the server, just because now all you really need to do is grab data, and then everything's more responsive. It works better on mobile this way, because another big reason to do this new kind of format is on mobile devices, it's much more efficient to download one big payload because you have high latency, latency, but maybe you have high bandwidth. So you can get a lot across the pipe possibly, but the latency is so high you don't want it to be chatty across the wire. So you don't want to keep doing page loads all the time that are like decent size. You want to get the whole application loaded, and then when you need to go fetch data, you can go fetch small chunks of data. That's kind of how most of the newer kind of applications work now.
So mobile is perfectly happy rendering it like itself as long as it can kind of get it all together. Like mobile's bottleneck is its bandwidth.
Well, yeah, mobile has issues around rendering like massive DOMs too, because you've got memory constraints and you've got CPU constraints. So those are also concerns, but the real big issue with mobile is bandwidth and network speed. Not even like bandwidth being the main thing. The main thing is latency, because a lot of times you're on 4G or 3G or whatever, and bandwidth is decent. It's just the latency is insanely bad.
Right. So okay, so like to kind of steer this, like to state management a little bit, like could you give an example of something that you would want to use Redux for to manage the state for?
Yeah, for sure. So like a good example would be, let's say like an online shopping system. Okay. Maybe you have somebody's web store and you are a user, you've logged into their store, or maybe you didn't log in, it doesn't really matter. And you viewed a few items and maybe you added a couple into your cart. What you would want to do is on the client side, you have a Redux store that says what's in your cart, right? And then every time, and if you want to persist this on the server, that's a different thing entirely, right? So what would happen would be, maybe on the server you get a cookie, the user gets a cookie, and then every time they add something to the cart, you add it to the Redux store client side, but you also push an AJAX request message that says, hey, this user added this to their cart. And then now you have a cookie that says that's in their cart. But also in the client side, you're not trying to sync it with the server the whole time because you know what the state is on the client side.
Right, because all the management can still happen on the client side. Like you can remove it from the cart without making a call. You just push the final information to
exactly. Yeah, and you can, the cool thing is you can do everything real time and make the application super snappy feeling. And then you can even batch updates back to the server and say like every 10 seconds you push down all the updates that the user did or something. So there's a lot of way more efficient ways to do stuff if you're managing state well on the client side.
Sure. And does that also allow you to create apps that can still maintain like a lot of their functionality without a connection?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, having like good client-side state management using something like Redux, it will allow you to do offline first apps. So it definitely helps with that. And then you can just, if the AJAX request fails and the server can't connect, you just say like, oh, you're not connected right now, but like we're saving all this stuff. Right. So, and you can even persist the Redux store to local storage or something, which is just, you know, in browser memory. And then even if you refresh the page, you can just rehydrate that data off of the local storage back into memory, and then you didn't lose anything.
And like, what keeps that from getting garbage cleaned?
Yeah, so what you're going to always have references to it. So that's your Redux store. So
as long as it has references tying it into the scope, then it doesn't get garbage cleaned.
Yeah. And then the old state can get garbage collected after it's done, and it gets ejected from the state. So every time you update the state, you can do that. But yeah, as long as you've got references to it, it won't get garbage collected. And then if you want to persist it, you can use something like local storage or IndexDB or of course just you post to the server side, right?
So wait, so what's IndexDB?
IndexDB is another.
Is that a client side like
Yeah,
database?
yeah, it's a client side database. Yeah, let's look at that.
So that's kind of handling like database management with it before it's sending like finalized values home.
Well, this is just an optional thing you could do if you wanted to have some kind of client side database. But yeah, it's actually a full relational database. And it's meant to replace things like local storage, because local storage is a really simple key value store based on the domain.
Yeah.
So like developer.mozilla.org, they can save stuff into your browser that'll still be there in local storage if you leave the page or close your browser and open it back up. But it's just a really simple like key value store. It blocks on the main UI thread when you access it, so you can't store a lot of data in there because you could potentially like lock up the UI,
exploit it.
Yeah. So you don't ever want to block the main UI thread, because that'll make it'll make it like really laggy and juddery to the user. The term that everybody seems to use now is called jank. So yeah,
jank.
You don't want screen jank.
That's funny. That's like that's what they call it when you homebrew like really trolly Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, so it makes a terrible concoction. Yeah. So
it's kind of my wheelhouse.
Nice. So I guess that's kind of like client side state management, and then so the interesting thing is a lot of times you talk about backend developers and front end developers. Now the lines are kind of
blurring.
They're not blurring. They're actually getting more. They're getting like way more defined actually, because the client side developer now has so much more work to do because they're maintaining this like really thick client on the front end that's doing all this stuff. And then the backend developer, all they're doing is making an API that the client talks to. But the client's really doing so much more work than they used to do.
So they don't want to get like stuck in a situation where they have to manage it all.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because somehow I feel like it used to be that the backend developers were more valuable to the organization, because they kind of had to do everything.
They knew the real programming languages.
Yeah, right. But I really don't think that's the case anymore. I think the client-side developers are now more valuable because that work is actually a lot harder than the server-side work for the most part. And you've got a lot more moving pieces. You've got a lot more things to worry about. Like if you're shipping a web app now, you're shipping it to mobile apps. You're shipping it to like multiple browsers. You're shipping it to you've got to worry about accessibility. Like it's such a huge amount of work. And then now you've got really rich client-side environments. Like programming React is not a joke, right? Like that's like you've got to learn a lot of stuff to code and React well.
Yeah, like if you can code and React well when you can put Facebook and Netflix together in your space.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think that backend is getting less intensive. Yeah, maybe, because it used to be that the backend was rendering the templates and everything, and they're delivering everything. But now, I mean, you don't need to do that. If you're using something like S3, you put all the client-side assets on CloudFront and let them get delivered that way, and then the backend can be its own separate system, and you host that on whatever platform you want, and you can make that all scalable separately, so that you can even scale the backend and the front end completely separately.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is like, like in some ways it seems like with how fancy client-side architecture has become, like you could almost get away with automating a lot of the back-end stuff too.
Yeah, and that's what people are doing more and more with stuff like Parse and Firebase. I'm not sure if you've heard of this. Let's do it in this window. So Firebase is it's a platform that lets you build APIs, and then you just expose the API, so you can use it from your app or your website or whatever.
Yeah.
And then there was another big one called Parse that Facebook bought at one point, but that was actually fairly popular. But you can look at the pricing. Like, let me try to get this window a little bigger so it doesn't go to the mobile view. Yeah, what they're doing, it's basically they've got a database, and I think it's a document structure, so it's something similar to like MongoDB. And then you expose it through APIs where you can push data to this database. And it's all automatic, you know. I mean, so that kind of stuff is happening.
Yeah.
And I would predict that stuff's going to happen more and more. It's the client side stuff that's actually becoming the thing that a lot of people are starting to spend a lot of time on, because that's like really that's what sets you apart from your competitor if you have a nice user experience.
Yeah. Have you seen the Facebook instant message games?
No.
It's like really, I don't know, it came out a couple of weeks ago or something, but I've been seeing a lot of news articles about it. But basically, like, on Facebook Messenger now, like, one of your options down by, like, smiley faces and add a photo and all that kind of stuff is, like, a game controller. And when you click it, there's just, like, a ton of free HTML5 games and that you can play against the person. And they, like, will pause themselves. If, like, I could start it with you, you know, play a game of pool, I make break, and then you're at work and you don't answer for like 3 hours, and the game just like pauses until you make your shot. Like, I don't know, it's
yeah,
cool.
Nice. Yeah, no, I've got to try that out. I haven't tried it yet. Yeah, so that's I guess that's what I want to say about backend and front end. Like, do you you kind of have the idea of what is the backend and what is the front end, or what that's considered now?
Yeah. Like the backend is like the database and like all of your, I guess, state management. And,
yeah, like if you're gonna persist something permanently, yeah, you've got to have to send it back to the server.
Yeah, and then like, I don't know, like routing.
Well, routing, that's the trick, because now if you've got a client-side application, you've got complex routing. So now you've got not only back-end routing on the server, you've got client-side routing as well.
So what all goes on the back end besides database and state management?
Yeah, so you've got the application that saves the stuff to the database and returns the stuff out of the database. Maybe you have some kind of caching to make things faster. You have so your backend is probably going to deal with things like load balancing. So you've got to worry about, like, if you've got a lot of traffic coming in, you need to split up the traffic between multiple servers. What else? You might have some, if you have a platform like Kubernetes or something, you've probably got auto scaling enabled, which means like as your application gets more traffic, more copies of the service will spin up.
Okay.
So yeah, all that kind of stuff is there. And then identity management you're going to do on the back end, because you can't really trust the client, right? That's the trick about web applications. You can never trust the client. So you always have to do anything with, you know, storage and identity management on the back end.
Yeah, I mean, it's in some ways it's like the web has finally like caught up to massive multiplayer online games. Like, you would download like a 15 gigabyte client that has all of the, you know, assets, and then like a lot of the, you know, code, like all the functionality and everything.
Yeah.
Like And it's just making asynchronous calls back to the server to let
Right.
to like make sure that like you're not speed hacking or like something like that. Like it's
No,
very
it
similar.
is. I mean, it's the same model, really. The only difference is we're doing everything now in the context of a browser, which makes it really easy. So like you don't ever have to write a native application like you do with a multiplayer game. You can write some little HTML and JavaScript, and you can build it all in React. And then now at the end of it, maybe you've got like half a meg, but because you've got all this nice stuff built into the browser, you've got all this nice functionality already, you can take advantage of it. And it's a symptom of like browsers just getting so much better, computers getting so much faster, bandwidth getting better. Like it's all just like advances slowly. It makes more sense to ship more stuff to the client.
So do you think that do you think we'll have less native applications and more browser like based?
Yeah.
Like I don't know. Like do you think like Call of Duty 9 is gonna be played through your browser?
I'd actually go a little bit farther with gaming. I think a lot of the next, maybe not next generation, maybe not the generation after that, but like at some point gaming, like console gaming, is going to literally be console gaming where you're streaming the game from a server, right? Because you could render it on the server and then just stream down what's happening.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, like that concept has been around since like there was something called Sega Satellite in like the 90s.
I've seen it before, and I've heard of people doing it. Like even on AWS, you can get some really like beefy NVIDIA chips on some of the servers on AWS, and like I've seen people setting it up before, but they just get too much lag. If we can figure out a way to make latency not as terrible, and like I think we will, as long as we can do, as long as more like data centers get built out and there's a lot of co-location or a lot of geographic options. So as long as you've got a data center really close to your house, like it'll probably make a lot of sense. It'll probably be possible eventually.
They need to make like they need to have like spin up a data center, like like the loads real hard, like we gotta
like every major city, to pull that off, you'd have to have every like major city have their own data center where you're going to stream games out of. But that's possible. Well, I mean, that's so close.
There's a mobile application called Kany, K-A-I-N-Y, I think that's how it's spelled. But and it allows you to take full control of your desktop from your cell phone.
Yeah.
And because of that, like with like the right conditions, like you can play Assassin's Creed 4 on your Samsung Galaxy.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
And so it's almost like that same kind of concept.
Exactly, yeah. And then it's just taking it one step further because you're still streaming it from your computer, right? But like at some point, you don't need anything with that processing power. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because it's like my phone's not doing the work. My phone's just calling home.
Right. But yeah, I think that'll happen a lot, and definitely, it seems like the trend of like fat clients is just getting more and more, and then definitely like native mobile apps. I wouldn't say that they'll go away, but it just becomes less necessary because you can do so much in a browser. I mean, PhoneGap has been around a while. Cordova, which is it renders a mobile app and then it shoves a web view inside of it. So you basically have a browser in a mobile app. Cordova's always been a little laggy and had performance issues. And if you got good performance out of a Cordova app, like you were like an expert at it, right? Like it wasn't easy to do.
Right.
But now there's stuff like React Native, which it's kind of a hybrid approach where you're still running JavaScript on another thread, and then you've got like this JavaScript engine going, but it's rendering native components and it's all abstracted away. But like you're writing JavaScript, even though
So it's transpiling, just
it's
essentially.
well, no, actually, it's kind of weird the way it works. You've got a JavaScript runtime engine, and then you've got the rest of the native mobile app, right? And then the JavaScript runtime engine is like controlling the mobile app and saying like render this actual native UI view component
So
and
it's
do
like
this and this.
so it's using it's using it like an
Yeah,
API.
exactly.
Like,
But it's actually using the native components, so it's fast.
right.
You just have this
Yeah,
JavaScript
it's funny. It's
thread.
like you're calling the phone's actual
Yeah.
components like an
Yeah,
API.
so it's way faster than Cordova or PhoneGap because it's not doing it in a web view; it's doing it natively, which is interesting.
Yeah, well, so like, with, man, I totally lost my train of thought there. It was like with browsers, like, at what point, like, like, I guess what I mean, like, okay, so we were just talking about native apps versus, like, web apps,
Yeah.
right? So, like, at what point, like, does the web app just act like the native app when you, like, when it knows that you're logged in on your phone, you know? Like,
Right, like you can already do that, you know? Like you have web workers and you can install a web page to operate offline on your app or on your phone, and it'll essentially function like a native app.
Yeah, because, like, I'm always seeing, like, you know, for example, Reddit will be like, hey, do you want to switch to the mobile app? It's, like, way more awesome.
Like, why?
And I'm like, well, why don't you just, like, render your site just like
Right,
the mobile
yeah,
app?
like let me just not install this extra thing on my phone that I don't need.
Yeah, they're trying to get them Google Play download perks.
Something, yeah. No, I mean, it seems really pointless if your mobile app works well to be installing your native app. I feel like other people feel that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that trend will probably continue. I mean, hopefully it will. And especially as phones get faster and, you know, web technology progresses. Like, there's a lot of new stuff coming out, like WebGL is getting really, really mature at this point. And so you can do, like, really complex...
You can do
yeah, like
crazy
3D
shit with
graphics in the browser.
Yeah. You should see like what you can do with WebAssembly.
Yeah, I was just about to say WebAssembly. That's another
WebGL.
big deal.
Yeah.
Because...
yeah, dude, there's a first-person multiplayer shooter game for the browser that's built in WebAssembly.
I think I've seen... is that the one that was on
WebGL.
Firefox a while back where they, like, kind of debuted it on there? Because at one point Firefox was, like, way ahead.
It was, like, part of the tutorial, like, for, you know, using those two components together. And, like, yeah. I can't remember. It was, like, I don't know, Death Gun or some shit like that.
Well, all the major browsers can do that now. Like, now that Edge is out,
yeah,
like, people aren't using IE.
Yeah, dude, I can't believe that Edge is, like, actually a legit
yeah,
browser.
yeah, right. Like, if you look on Can I Use, Edge is up there.
Up there. Yeah, I know. They decided that, like, they were really sick of everybody making fun of Internet Explorer.
Which is good.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like, everything
dude,
can do it.
It's been patched up with everything, like, a lot longer than a couple of other browsers, for sure. Like, it's been using, what, is it ES6 for a little bit longer? No. Grid CSS.
Okay.
Edge was, like, one of the first ones to adopt that.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, the new... okay. Yeah, no, I mean, Edge has been good. Like, if you look, they're right on track with everybody else. And then they actually have a decent... well, I don't know how decent their share is, but...
like 2%, dude.
But Chrome... I mean,
No,
Chrome is still really
not
good.
even-
Like, Chrome's still got most of the market share. And you can see, like, most people are only one version behind. Like, it drops off really significantly after that.
Yeah, Firefox lost everybody when it was having terrible memory leak problems, like, I don't know, 10 years ago. Like, Chrome came out, like, right when everyone was super sick of how their
Yeah.
Firefox was bloated as hell and just like eating their system resources. You could just like watch your memory dial up like it was a odometer or whatever.
So apparently
And,
it's reversed now. Yeah, like
really? It's
yeah,
eating itself?
I just was reading something about like how Firefox is faster now because they rewrote it to be faster than Chrome. Like originally, apparently Chrome's like real big innovation was that each of these different tabs became separate threads. So
Yeah.
like,
so that the browser wouldn't crash
Yeah,
all together. It would just crash
right.
the thread.
and then like what Firefox did, they in the new versions they went even farther and they made like each separate part of each tab a separate thread. So like
Oh.
the CSS rendering and like the JavaScript parsing is separate threads and stuff. So it's like way faster apparently. Yeah,
That's crazy. Yeah, I use Firefox Focus for like lightweight incognito browsing.
Okay.
But it's just a mobile app. It's pretty like it's their own thing. Like it's not somebody's fork, but it's pretty new this year or something. I can't remember. I don't know. Someone recommended it to me because it's super easy to read like text on it. Like the web snaps up.
Yeah, I might have to check that out.
The other thing that I was gonna say though is that I have to tell you, if you use Chrome, like by far, I'm getting the most mileage out of this plugin that I got like 2 months ago, or this extension. I had never even heard of it. I was just looking for something that did what it does. It's called the Great Suspender.
Oh yeah, that one.
And-
I've used that before.
Dude, I have a bad tendency to open like 550 tabs, and I already and it only got worse like when I like upgraded my computer because now I can like just open
Yeah.
infinity tabs. But and then it's suddenly like, man, the browser's locking up. I must have like 600 tabs open right now. I should probably do something about that. And then it's like nothing to do. So I started using like Session Buddy and other things like that so I could kind of like manage my tabs. But being able to just open something in a dead tab is like solid. And then I have it to just kill it every 10 minutes, except for like specific websites.
Have you seen the one? It's like an O'Reilly. It's like a fake O'Reilly book. Maybe it's a meme. And it's like how to manage like 5,000 open tabs or something. Like
No, but that sounds like a book I should be
trying-
reading.
Like, have you seen these?
That's awesome. No, dude, that's funny.
There is one. It's something about managing tabs.
Dude, before Google was a thing, my older brother, like, we used to call
Managing and
him
navigating
'cause
1
he-
million browser tabs.
Dude, that is awesome. You gotta
Yeah.
link that to me. Send that to me.
Will
for
do.
Sure. Also, I like the one that says "crushing it" and it's a unicorn. Like it is of the 4 images that are in related images. It's like 2 in and 1 down.
What is it?
Crushing, like scroll down.
Oh,
It's
Oh,
like
crushing it?
It's next to fear.
Nice.
Yeah. Crushing it.